On this edition of the OFN Today, Ryan Aber, Oklahoma football writer for the Oklahoman at newsok.com, is here to update the latest Sooners news, including a preview of this week's game against Iowa State. Also here is Ted Sevransky of Covers.com, who will help me to preview 3 college football and 3 NFL games this week with the latest injury news, odds, and some picks. All this and more is the OFN Today on the Our-Lads Football Radio Network. Starts now. All right, it's Thursday, September 13th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Today. The OFN Today is brought to you by OurLads.com with the best pro and college football depth charts on the net. PrimeSportsNetwork.com, the sleeper sports side of the industry where we debate, handicap, and inform you with the very best. And Covers.com, featuring live scores, stats, and odds, and is considered the most convenient and entertaining source for sports news and facts with over 45 million visits a year. Don't forget also, you could email your questions or comments at OFN@PrimeSportsNetwork.com. And our Twitter handle is @PrimeSN. And same thing, questions or comments, you could throw them there. Send us a message, and we'll, as long as it's not so vulgar, you know, it's got to be spot on, and make it a contribution to the show, and we'll definitely talk about it on the air. So, but anyway, it's the internet, so we can kind of do what we want here anyhow. But anyway, later on, give us about 10 or 15 minutes. Ted will be with me, and we're going to go over all those games. So key games today and tomorrow. Tomorrow's with Dave Koken, so I've separated those. So we've got 3 college today, 3 college tomorrow, 3 NFL today, 3 NFL tomorrow. And we also did, I think we kind of did the same thing with Mark Lawrence yesterday. So that gives us 9 college and 9 NFL games Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every week that we're going to let you in on and give you updates on as far as trends, the latest odds, overall analysis, and, of course, some picks as well. So that'll be coming up in about 10 or 15 minutes with Ted Sevransky. But first, let's talk some Oklahoma Sooners football with Ryan Aber. Ryan, thanks for taking your time to talk to us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on this afternoon.
Well, it's good to have you back, Ryan. We talked to you last year a couple of times during the season, and it was a magical run for Oklahoma that ended in the playoffs. And with Baker Mayfield gone and a lot of other key players, people were unsure how Lincoln Riley was going to do in year 2 without Baker. But he did have, of course, an exciting young quarterback that has been kind of waiting his time for the past couple of years to get a shot in Kyler Murray. And so far, so good. He actually seems, I haven't looked at the latest Heisman odds, but the way he's running around out there and putting up points for the Sooners, I got to believe he's an interesting one.
Yeah, no doubt about it. He certainly injected himself into the conversation early in the season, at least. And he's doing it in much the way that Baker Mayfield did it, 3 years ago when he first got the starting job at Oklahoma. He's making plays with his feet, keeping plays alive, although he's not just taking off and running like some people thought he might, given the fact that he's got such great speed. And he's also been a whole lot more accurate than he was as a freshman at Texas A&M. The last time we saw him as a starting quarterback when he started 3 games for the Aggies a few years ago, he had some issues with accuracy and throwing the ball to the other team. But to this point, he's answered that a little bit and done about as well as Oklahoma could have hoped through 2 games.
Unfortunately, he's not going to have big-time talent to hand off to the rest of the season, Rodney Anderson. So talk about that injury. That's a huge injury. I mean, I'm a Rodney Anderson fan. I really thought that he was going to be a big part of the team this season, especially with a young quarterback behind center. So how much are they going to miss him, and what's the solution behind Anderson?
Well, they're going to miss him a lot. I mean, this is a guy who was arguably the best player overall in college football in the second half of last season.
Yep.
And that's saying something for a team that played with the Heisman Trophy winner last year. But Rodney Anderson was so good over the last 8 games or so of last year and was really good the first 2 games this year until he went out with that injury on the last play of the first quarter against UCLA. But they're going to go back to doing what they did early last season. If you remember that game at Ohio State when the Sooners went up there and shocked the Buckeyes, They did it with Rodney Anderson never even leaving the bench. Rodney Anderson was healthy that day and the number 4 running back. So they're going to go with a committee approach. Trey Sermon's going to be their number 1 guy. He had some really good games last year. Marcelius Sutton and the freshman T.J. Pledger are also going to be right in there. But they're just going to sort of ride the hot hand. If they get one of those guys going, they're going to be the guy who keeps getting fed.
If you had to name a guy right now, besides Murray on offense, that may be the next Rodney Anderson, either running back, wide receiver, and let's even take Marquise Brown out of the equation because, of course, he had a really good year last year. Somebody that could be a sleeper, somebody that could distinguish himself in his for his first season.
Well, I know that I would call this guy a sleeper, but the first name that pops up, probably their best offensive player right now, and that's saying something with Marquise Brown being out there, but a CeeDee Lamb. I mean, the catch that he made that wound up being ruled an incompletion was an incompletion because he landed out of bounds against UCLA. Just was probably the most athletic play that I've seen in a long time. Had a great touchdown catch at a different point in that game, and he's a guy who is emerging as a number 1 type of wide receiver. I'm actually writing about this for the Oklahoman this weekend. Are CeeDee Lamb and Marquise Brown the best 1-2 wide receiver combination in Oklahoma history?
Wow.
As far as playing at the same time? And that's saying something, given the great wide receivers that have come through there over the last 20 years, especially since Bob Stoops really changed around that offense. But they've certainly got an argument. If they keep it up, there is not going to be an argument because CeeDee Lamb and Marquise Brown, with the differences in skill sets between the two of them, are a really dangerous combination in the passing game.
All right, on defense, so far, scoring-wise, only 35 points in 2 games, so it's a good start. But last year, they also got up to a pretty good start. And then for most of the season, it was the offense that carried the load. And then in the playoff game, they couldn't stop Georgia. There were some key players that are gone from last year's defensive team. So what do you think about this year's defense compared to last year's?
Well, to this point, it looks a whole lot better, and it's not just the results that they're getting, but how they're doing it. They've had 8 sacks through a couple games. They got to UCLA's quarterback 6 times last week, and there's been a lot of talk the last couple of years, and a lot of it's centered around just because of how pass-happy the Big 12 is and how bad Oklahoma's secondary has played. But the fact is their front 7 wasn't able to get much pressure outside of that spot that was Obo Okoronkwo the last 2 years and Eric Stryker before that. That's pretty much where all their quarterback pressure came from. Now they're doing it in some different ways. They're getting it from the middle of their line with guys like Neville Gallimore, from the edges with guys like Mark Jackson and Kenneth Mann and some of those other ones. And they're being able to give defenses some different looks to make themselves a whole lot less predictable and help out some of those young secondary guys. Another factor of their defense being better, I think, is the fact that they've recruited better in recent years, and those guys are seeing the field quickly. They've got a lot of freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and sophomores playing, especially in the secondary, but also at linebacker and at a couple other spots, and that's really helped this defense show better over these first couple weeks of the season. Is there one player that, sort of like the offensive question I asked you, is there a player on defense that could be their, at any position, that could be like their next, even just first team Big 12? Well, the obvious one is the freshman nickelback, DB, Buki Radley-Hiles, Brendan Radley-Hiles. He came in as a 5-star guy, and everybody expected him to make an immediate impact. He has. But there's another freshman on that defense who's played really well through 2 games, especially that Florida Atlantic game. Really got after Chris Robeson well, and once he settled down is when their defense settled down, and that's Ronnie Perkins, the defensive end. And I think Ronnie Perkins is going to be a guy who's going to play a lot for Oklahoma over the next couple of years. And if Oklahoma's defense is going to be better this year consistently, then he's going to have a big part in that. All right, let's talk about the game and Iowa State. Anytime a big program like Oklahoma loses a game the way they lost last year to Iowa State, the only loss in the regular season is a 31-point favorite.
There's always gonna be that interesting reaction, whether you want to call it revenge or not. It's kind of hard for me to think that because Oklahoma's pretty much dominated a lot of teams from the Big 12. So every once in a while they're gonna lose one of these games. But how is the reaction? How does a program like Oklahoma take to a so-called revenge spot, or do you think this is just another game?
Well, publicly they've said it's just another game. The revenge doesn't matter. But Lincoln Riley said that. The players have said that. But behind closed doors, they've said that this game is on their minds a year ago. Lincoln Riley mentioned it in his post-game address to the team the other day. So it's certainly something that's on their mind. This is clearly a different Iowa State team for a lot of reasons. But it's an Oklahoma team, I think, that realizes that they need to come out and play their best regardless of who the opponent is. Oklahoma's been really good on the road over the last few years. It's been, I think they have the longest true road game winning streak in college football, which got a little bit of an asterisk to that, given the fact that a couple years ago they lost to Houston. That was technically a neutral site game, even though it was in Houston. OU Texas every year obviously gets taken out of the equation because it's a neutral site game. But they've been really good on the road, and they've been really good in Ames. They haven't lost to Iowa State in Ames since 1960. So it's a pretty lengthy winning streak for the Sooners up there.
Yeah, that's one true road loss since 2014, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time since Oklahoma's been defeated on the road.
Wow, that is something. All right, so talk about Iowa State, the opponent this week, and Kyle Kempt is out, the starting quarterback. So Zab Noland, he played a little last year. Does he get the start? And Iowa State kind of hard to figure because they didn't get the first game because it was washed out, whatever. And that was probably tough on them going to Iowa without playing a game, and Iowa had already played a game, and you could probably see that. They just didn't seem like they were in sync at all. And I think Iowa State's a good football team. I think they have a very good year. They can avoid injuries. They're not as deep as Oklahoma. But what do you think about this game for Iowa State's point of view? Backup quarterback, how do you think Oklahoma handles that? And also, from what you just know about Iowa State so far this season in just one game.
Well, first of all, you got to start with Iowa State's defense. They were terrific. Last year, it's slowing down Oklahoma's running game. Got really good after that because during that game, we didn't really realize how good Iowa State was. Turned out they were pretty good. Their defense, it remains to be seen if they're as good or better than they were last year, given the fact they've just played one game. But they played really well in the game against Iowa. Oklahoma certainly will stretch him down the field a little bit more. But offensively, I think is going to be the key for the Cyclones. You mentioned Zeb Nolan. He is likely to be the starter on Saturday in Ames, and he's a guy who's had some moments.
Yeah.
Played for most of the game against Oklahoma State a year ago when Kyle Kempt got injured and was really good in that game. He started against Baylor and had some really good highlight moments, but he's a guy who the downside is maybe a little bit greater than Kyle Kempt. Kyle Kempt is sort of the safe guy. Zeb Noland is a little bit of a gamble, so Oklahoma might have their hands full. But Iowa State's offensive line really struggled a week ago against Iowa. Will they be able to make a jump from week 1 to week 2? I think that's going to be a big key to if they're able to get David Montgomery, the running back, going, because Montgomery really killed Oklahoma last year, had about 145 all-purpose yards.
Yeah, Montgomery and Anderson were two of my favorite backs in the whole country, and they happened to be from the Big 12. And, yeah, they got to get Montgomery going. And I think Hakeem Butler is somebody to watch, the wide receiver, big guy, 6'6". They lose Lazard, so we would expect Butler is going to come into play. Yeah, I really like this Iowa State team, but it looks like it's going to be kind of tough for them to avoid going 0-2 with this big Oklahoma team coming in town. So it should be a lot of fun, though, especially in Ames, the way things went last year for them. There was an exciting place to watch a college football game, and hopefully it'll be an exciting game again. I'm looking forward to it, and I appreciate you taking your time out today, Ryan, to talk to us. And I hope we get an opportunity to talk again. Maybe another ride to the playoffs this season would be a lot of fun, especially if Kyler Murray can keep doing some magical things on the football field.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Appreciate you having me on, and like you said, hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again before too long.
You got it. Thanks, Ryan. All right, that's Ryan Aber, And I'm early on in the season, before the season even begins, it's very difficult. Again, I said this many times, with no preseason games to even see something. And look, if most teams did what I would hope that they would do, and you would get like a lot of first games, almost like preseason games, then I think I would probably hold my predictions until after that. But that's not the case. We get all these huge games early on that if teams lose them, it's like, okay, well, they're almost out of the playoffs already. So you got to make those predictions and put them in. And very hard to gauge Oklahoma with as much as they lost, including Mayfield, and not to know how Kyler Murray would play. And then all of a sudden, you've got true freshmen that are, as Ryan said, are coming up and making impact plays and being big-time performers for this team. And Murray has done a great job. I've been a Lincoln Riley fan since East Carolina. I've talked about that. Matter of fact, I mentioned that a few years back when he was there. And East Carolina went through a nice few-year run, and they were an explosive team. And we talked about him on our shows as an up-and-comer, and here he is. He's got the job, stoop, step down, and he's just done a great job, and he's obviously doing a great job with Kyler Murray. So I think the Oklahoma Sooners are, if you want to call them a dark horse national championship pick, I guess you can call them a dark horse because of the fact that everybody always wants to talk about Alabama, Clemson, and maybe even Ohio State. I don't know how you feel about that, Teddy, but I haven't checked the odds yet. I was going to check it. I didn't have time before I came on the air, but Oklahoma's probably still got pretty decent odds compared to those three big teams to win the national championship. They might be an interesting play.
Sure, but again, when you're talking about winning the national title, you have to, for a team like Oklahoma, they got to run the table and then win a pair of games in the playoffs. And you'll actually make a lot more money if you just bet Oklahoma on the money line every game and roll it over than you would if you bet Oklahoma to win it all. I'm just looking for the odds on the future book right now. Give me just a minute. I'll track them down.
I know they're definitely, well, unless they've gone down. I know that they were over 10-1. So I don't know if they've dropped since opening day. Because I think there were only like three teams that might have been single digits, and that was because they were so heavily favored. And, of course, we're talking about the big three, Alabama, Clemson, and even throw in Georgia with Ohio State. Matter of fact, Oklahoma was 16-1 when the season began to win the national championship. So I do have to throw Georgia in there along with Ohio State, and I should because Georgia was my pick to win the national championship. But, everybody wants to talk always about Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama, deservedly so.
Sure. I mean, from a power rating standpoint, I've got those four teams all ranked slightly above Oklahoma, I should say. Alabama's obviously at the top. But the question, the SEC got two teams in last year. Is that going to happen every year? Is that going to happen again this year?
It shouldn't.
Yeah.
I don't think the fans like it outside of the SEC or whenever that is. I mean, because that's something that we, when a couple years ago when Penn State got robbed, it was almost like, okay, I guess they don't want two teams from the same conference in. And the next year, I guess they do. So that's the thing about this whole ridiculous 4-team playoff thing, which will be over once this contract is over in several years, and they will bounce to 8. I have no doubt in my mind about that. It's just that you don't know what the criteria is, and that's so aggravating as a fan. Because they'll tell you, the representative of the committee will say something one year, and then the next year they'll do something completely different and say something completely different.
Of course, it's a classic circular argument where they're going to be able to defend whatever team that they feel like putting in that year, and the decisions are made. Make no mistake about it. The decisions are based on who's going to draw the largest audience, and it's not about fans. Remember, when you're talking about at that level, the fans are already going to watch. All right? Every college football fan will watch the playoffs, is what we do. What they want is to attract the mainstream audience, the non-college football fans. And that means the marquee programs get more leeway than the less marquee programs do when it comes to, when do they lose and how do they lose and all of that kind of stuff. It's all about money, and that's, and we know that. But don't think for a minute about, get the 4 best teams. No, it's not about getting the 4 best teams. It's about how does they make the most money, and that comes from TV ratings.
And that's why you get teams like Ohio State and Alabama getting into the playoffs the last 2 years when they probably didn't deserve to, based on normal criteria. Okay, so let's talk about some of these college football games that I've reserved for just you, Teddy, especially since I happen to pick three more like West Coast games. So you're part of the country. And let's start with UCLA and Fresno State. And this is a game, I believe I saw the spread was 1 UCLA recently. So I don't know if that's changed. I think it should change because anybody in my mind, that's looking at that game should be smart enough to put all the money should be going on Fresno in my mind because, look, UCLA, the quarterback play is terrible right now. It ain't changing in 1 week. If they're going to win this game, they got to win the game kind of the way that Minnesota did last week. They got to win with defense. And just hope that Fresno doesn't make a play here or there. That's it. They got to win the same way, 17-14, 14-13. They're not scoring. They're not scoring on anybody. Maybe in a few weeks, in another month, when the kid starts to get a little bit more comfortable back there, if he does. But Fresno's got better players. They're a better quarterback. Right now they got a go-to receiver. They have a little bit more of a confidence winning kind of deal going with Tedford since last year. So I think I think they should be the favorite in this game by 3 points. So because of that, I think they're a pretty good play. I'm not saying it's an easy pick because UCLA has at least played pretty good defense the first couple of weeks, but I just think Fresno's a better team.
Well, the markets have certainly agreed with you. Literally in the last hour before we record, we've seen a big move on Fresno. I wrote it down this morning, and this line was Pick'em or UCLA 1 in some spots, and I'm looking at it right now, and it's Fresno minus 2.5 just about everywhere.
Wow. Okay.
So it's been a heavy move towards Fresno, and the only way there's a move like that today is because it looks like Wilton Speight is not going to play for the Bruins again. They'll be going with the Frosh QB, but maybe you've been watching a different UCLA defense than I've been watching. I watched a UCLA defense that couldn't stop Cincinnati, a team that struggled against Miami last week and then couldn't stop Oklahoma last week. This is a UCLA defense that gave up almost 300 rushing yards per game on the ground last year. So defensively, there are nothing but question marks.
Well, I guess the reason why I mentioned that is just because the fact that, I mean, college compared to the NFL, like if you give up 49 points to Oklahoma when you're doing nothing on offense, to me, that's I would have expected Oklahoma to score more than that, to tell you the truth. So, look, if you want to look at something that actually is going right for UCLA, it's got to be the defense over the offense, though, and that's not saying a lot based on what you just said because you're right. It's just that their offense is so pathetic right now.
I couldn't disagree more.
Yeah.
The UCLA, okay, Oklahoma scored on every single drive. I think they scored touchdowns on every single drive that they cared about last week.
Yeah,
every time they had the football down the field into the end zone, they didn't even face third downs. It was like first down they gain 8. Second down they gain 8 more. It was just over and over again. Again, Cincinnati couldn't move the ball against Miami last week. Against UCLA, second half, marching up and down the field, boom, down the score, win the game. I watch UCLA offensively say, hey, they got some skill position talent. They really do. They've got a couple of guys who can take the ball to the house anytime they have it in their hands.
They just can't get their hands on it.
No, the quarterback plays this bottom tier.
It's pathetic.
I watched Fresno, Minnesota last week. Fresno was the better of the two teams, but they wore down. They couldn't get the stop when they needed to it, and I worry about their depth in this game. I think the Bruins might be bargain priced here. Fresno, I understand you think Fresno. I don't think Fresno should be favored at UCLA. And if ever there's a get healthy game for the Bruins, this is Chip Kelly's opportunity to do that.
All right,
UCLA or me for pass.
Okay,
or UCLA or pass for me.
Okay. And again, though, like I said, that's why I'm just going to be surprised that if they win, it's because this Thompson Robinson kid makes some plays to beat any team. Any Division I team. I just think he's awful right now. And I think that's why I think if they win, the defense has got to make some plays at some point in the game. And just like that kid Winfield did from Minnesota, that was like one of the plays of the year in college football. If that would have been somebody from, Ohio State making that play, that would, everybody would be calling him All-American. That was just a tremendous play. So.
Sure, and look, and the kid McMarion for Fresno, he can chuck the football.
Yes,
around.
Yes, he can.
Fresno has, Fresno gets the kids. Tedford's gotten the kids that basically wash out of the bigger programs in California or are a little bit too small to play for the Pac-12 schools. But from a speed standpoint, from a skill position talent standpoint, Fresno's all right. But that being said, I do think UCLA does have offensive playmakers.
Yep.
We've seen them a little bit. This might be the opportunity to see them a little bit more. Big step down in class from playing Oklahoma to playing Fresno.
Yeah, McMarion actually transferred from Oregon State from the Pac-12. Okay, let's talk about this is becoming some sort of a rivalry game, USC and Texas. And it was a big game last year. This was when Sam Darnold was at USC, and everybody expected that USC was going to romp in this game for revenge, and it didn't happen. And Texas played, I don't know, based on the way they played last season at that time, they kind of overachieved over their heads. But it was a really exciting game. USC still was able to win the football game, but it was a nail-biter. But now you get two teams, two big programs that have both underachieved at this point. I mean, USC just looked pretty bad. Look, if you think about it, USC for 6 quarters out of 8 this year have done nothing. The freshman quarterback is a freshman, and right now he doesn't look like he's nothing like a Sam Darnold freshman. So he's going to take some growing pains. Clay Helton, not a big fan at Texas, but Texas, after that really disappointing loss to Maryland, I mean, Tulsa? Seriously, what's going on at Texas with Herman? So I don't know what to think about these two coaches in this game. Period. I mean, I think this is a game you got to stay away from.
Don't confuse Herman with Helton. Okay,
I
Helton's
agree.
a clown who lucked his way into a job.
Yep.
Okay, that's like a clown may be a little bit much, but Helton is. These are the numbers. Okay, on Clay Helton. 1-9 against the spread as an underdog since taking the USC job. 4-13 against the spread in the last 17 overall. USC consistent underachievers, and of course the quarterback Daniels, he's got a banged up hand. He's expected to go, but he certainly didn't. And you say they played one good half? No, they played one good quarter. That was the fourth quarter. Remember, that was a 5-point game against UNLV in week 1, going into the fourth.
That's true.
And the fourth quarter, the skill position talent just wore UNLV down. They had a couple of big play touchdowns and yada yada.
Yep.
They ended up winning. They didn't cover that spread, but they won the game. But I want no part of this USC team right now. I don't like anything about them. I cashed a ticket against them each of the first 2 weeks, and I'm probably going to have Texas in my pocket before this one kicks off as well. Now that 3 is becoming the prevailing number. Boy, you read the quotes out of Texas. Here's the senior nose tackle, Chris Nelson. When an opponent like USC comes in, of course there's a level of hype. Everybody's ready. Everybody's hyped up. Just excited for this game, so the juice is pumping now. You think the juice was pumping against Tulsa last week?
No.
I don't think it was. It was a flat spot. They played like a flat spot.
I'm willing to...
Texas is fine. And when you look at Tom Herman, Tom Herman has an extraordinary track record dating back to when he was the offensive coordinator at Iowa State, before he got the Ohio State job, before he got the Houston job, before he got the Texas job. Him as ridiculous numbers as an underdog. I think 2 point spread losses in all that time as a dog. Last year Texas was an easy bet for me, wire-to-wire winner in this contest. Now they're laying.
Yeah.
But you know what? They're the better of these two teams, and Texas has something to prove. USC does too, but USC can't. They're not good enough. I'll take the Longhorns minus the 3.
Yeah, Texas just 1-5 is a home favorite under Herman in 2 years. So that concern. With these two teams, I wouldn't be surprised if Texas won by 3, if it was a 3-point spread. Knowing the way these two teams are playing. But I do agree. I think Texas right now is, I would say, because I look at this Texas team, and at least on paper I say, okay, I still think they got more talent than USC, especially at the quarterback spot, and they're at home, and they got a better coach. And so I'm willing to, and I concede the point definitely that when you have that opening game against Maryland, even though they lost, you can't just say, okay, they're going to get up for Tulsa with USC coming. That's just not the way it works. They're still kind of looking at USC, even though they're playing Tulsa, even though they lost the week before. So,
and they're up again. They're up 21-0 against Tulsa, and all right, they didn't put the pedal to the metal. They didn't stick a fork in them.
Yeah,
they had to hang on for the win. I didn't downgrade Texas off that loss.
Yep.
I downgraded USC in my power numbers following each of their first 2 losses this season.
All right.
Or I shouldn't say loss. It was a win for Texas, but from a Vegas, I live in Vegas.
Sure.
From a Vegas perspective, they are obviously 0-2 against the number.
All right, and then Arizona State, San Diego State, I believe this line's about 5. San Diego State won last year, so Arizona State looking for payback here. And maybe that's good for Arizona State to have payback on their minds, considering you got to believe all the emotion that they've spent the first couple of weeks. Herm Edwards' first game, they romped, then Michigan State's in town, big win. All of that, and now they got to get up for San Diego State, knowing that Washington's next on the road. So I don't know. I don't know if you can keep this up, but they're just clearly a better team than San Diego State right now, especially with the Aztecs down to their backup quarterback. Even their starter doesn't really do much, but the backup can't be. I mean, 2 picks against Sacramento State. So I think Arizona State has to be really flat in this game to lose this one, even though San Diego State has a good defense and another good running back.
Well, I mean, first of all, this is the definition of a bad spot.
Yes.
The flat-out definition. Here's Arizona State, okay? They were expected to be contending for last place in the Pac-12 South. Now they've won 2 games. One of them was a blowout against a bad team. The other one was a wild come-from-behind in the fourth quarter. Remember, by the way, Utah State hung 31 on Sparty, moved the ball up and down the field against them. Manny Wilkins and company, they had 3 points going to the fourth quarter, took advantage of a tired defense that was worn down in the heat,
sure.
Playing, after 2 a.m. in their body clocks.
Sure.
I'm not sold on Arizona State being all that. I like Manny Wilkins, good quarterback, no question. But last year, San Diego State dominated this game at the line of scrimmage. They had close to 300 rushing yards. Arizona State couldn't rush for 2 yards a carry in that contest. I don't believe they were below 1.5 yards per carry in that contest, and nothing's changed in that regard. And here's San Diego State. Oh, their quarterback's hurt. Guess what? Christian Chapman's a stiff to begin with. So when you have a mediocre, that's stiff. Obviously, he's a better quarterback than I am or you are. That's why he's playing college ball and we're talking about it. But I'm not looking at Chapman as, okay, this guy's not going to make plays to win you the game. He's your game manager. As a backup, Agnew is a game manager. And you know what? They lost the number 1 draft choice to the Seattle Seahawks in Rashad Penny in the offseason. Have you seen his replacement, Juwan Washington?
Sure.
300 yards already, 4 touchdowns. The guy's a beast.
Yep.
Aztecs will battle in this one to be San Diego State or nothing for me. Arizona State, you talked about Washington next week.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talk about a flat spot in between.
Yep.
And they just got nationally ranked. It's absolutely the definition of a trap game for the Sun Devils. I can only look at the Aztec side.
Yeah, Herm probably would say to himself, man, I just wish we would take this game like the Washington game, because he knows that the chances are they fall flat in this game, they'll be 2-2. And that's just the way that it's going to be. But still, it's good to see that Arizona State, nobody knew how this program was going to react to Herm Edwards. And so at least I think this is a good sign that things aren't going to be all that terrible. He's got a pro coaching staff. He does have Wilkins as a senior. The kid Harry, the wide receiver, is one of the best receivers in the country, especially that nobody's ever heard of. But yeah, it's still a long way to go. Arizona State was picked last in the division and maybe even the conference for a reason. So
yeah, well, I had actually UCLA last,
and deservedly so. That's for sure.
But Arizona State barely above them. I'll just put it that way.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the NFL, and let's start off with a big one in Pittsburgh. Might be the game of the week. Kansas City and the Steelers. The Steelers looking to, avoid starting the season with 2 ties. But for Kansas City, they come off a big win on the West Coast. Tyreek Hill, it was the Tyreek Hill show. He did his young quarterback a big favor. And was able to get into the end zone twice early on in the game and pretty much give him a cushion. Make things a lot easier for Mahomes. Mahomes is going to be a good quarterback. Andy Reid's a quarterback guru, so that's going to be real exciting and fun to watch. They're at Pittsburgh, though, and Pittsburgh is, again, they're desperate for a win after the embarrassing tie to Cleveland. But the spread is what? Pittsburgh is about a 4-point favorite at home. I still think this whole Le'Veon Bell thing is a distraction. I picked Cincinnati and Baltimore to finish ahead of them in the standings before the season began, and I see no reason to think that still won't happen after what I watched last week. I think the Chiefs are a good play, especially as a dog. I'd be willing to put the money line on the Chiefs.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that assessment at all. There are 2 red flags for Kansas City.
Okay.
And number one, they are the most popular underdog on the board among public bettors. And boy, if you want to find one subset that doesn't do very well in the NFL, it's popular underdogs. Public underdogs. And KC, by far, the most popular underdog, just like Auburn. The LSU is the most popular big dog in college, and those tend to be red flag games for me. I tend to stay away from them. The other issue, of course, is I know Pittsburgh's 0-1. But from a wise guy perspective, the Steelers are 0-1, the Chiefs are 1-0, and they will always bet the 0-1, the winless team over the team that just got a win under their belt.
That's right.
We've seen, and that's one of those long-term trends, and you see that pretty consistently. We haven't seen that in the Arizona-LA game, but in every other game with a 1-0 versus an 0-1, I guess Oakland-Denver is another one that we haven't seen dog money. But the bottom line is normally it's very, very normal to see the 0-1 team getting the money against the 1-0 squad. And we've seen two-way action. There was a heavy KC money at the open, and now we've seen a buyback on Pittsburgh over the course of the last 24 hours. There's a third factor that people don't like about KC as well, and that's, of course, we say, it's the second straight road. No, it isn't. It's the fourth road game in 5 weeks for Kansas City because you don't think about the preseason, but they played on the road weeks 3 and 4, weeks 2 and 3 of the preseason, had a home game week 4, and then on the road weeks 1 and 2 of the regular season. And the trends point strongly against teams on the road the first 2 games of the season that win game 1. They've been point spread disaster area in recent years in game 2.
Interesting.
Yes. Okay. All of that being said, I think Kansas City's an undervalued commodity. And I want no part of the Steelers right now. I'm with you on Pittsburgh being very, very vulnerable. And here's a little fun one for you.
Okay.
There's 2 coaches in the NFL with a winning straight-up record as road underdogs. One of them is named Belichick. The other one, Andy Reid in Kansas City, a winning straight-up record as a road dog. You don't see that very often. This is Andy Reid's role.
That's probably because of the fact that in spots that he's at home and expected to win, that doesn't happen as often as you'd like, which is why he's Andy Reid. So
sure.
I think that's why so many people are disappointed overall, because he'll win a lot of games, and then when he's in spots like the playoff game last year that you're supposed to win at home, he doesn't win them. So, but that's Andy Reid. Anyway, okay, sounds good. Next up, let's go to Cleveland and New Orleans. And speaking of the tie and the Steelers, you got the Browns here. That I don't know, Browns fans, that game, the way things went, and it looked like here we go again, and they come back, and now it's looking like, we're going to steal this win, and then Mike Tomlin gets conservative and settles for a field goal try and misses, and then what does Hugh Jackson do? Well, he doesn't learn the lesson. Okay, let's just settle for a long field goal with our young kicker, who is still lucky to be on this team and who's got all the pressure in the world of trying to break our long, almost 30-game losing streak. That's a real smart play by Jackson, but it didn't work, and now Cleveland's got to go to New Orleans as an 8-point dog, and that's not a good spot considering that the Saints, I got to believe Sean Payton is going to, this week at practice, I would imagine he's going to be pretty hard after what he saw last week.
Yeah, but, the Saints have a long history of getting off to slow starts under Sean Payton. Payton does not have them ready out of training camp year after year after year. You want to make money with New Orleans? Fine. Bet them week 3, bet them week 4, bet them week 12. Don't bet them the first 2 weeks of the season. This coach has been a point spread disaster area, and, you're getting the better defense plus more than a touchdown. And that's something that I'm always interested in. Now, obviously, the Saints are supposed to play this week like their hair's on fire after the embarrassment last week, the debacle against Tampa, where over and over and over again, what they give 8 passing plays and more than 20 yards. That's coaching, okay? That's coaching. And I haven't been in love with the Saints coaching staff for quite some time, and that hasn't changed as of now. Cleveland, of course, every time you take the Browns, it's a leap of faith, okay? It is. I understand the reluctance to back Cleveland. But I'm not going to get to the window with Cleveland here either, and here's why. They were in the start of the fourth quarter against Pittsburgh, they're +5 in turnovers and down by 2 touchdowns. Okay, I don't care they came back and tied the game. Okay, when you're +5 in turnovers and down by 2 touchdowns, You're still the Browns.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a game I want no part of. This much I will say for Cleveland. Cleveland, for me, is a dead nuts under team. I was lucky to cash my under with them last week because obviously the game went into overtime and then no points were scored in the OT. But I'm going to look to bet Browns games under as much as possible, though I don't know if I want to do it against this offense this week. But Cleveland, their offenses just don't screw it up. And those are generally the type of teams I like to play under the total.
I wonder if New Orleans wins this game big and Tyrod Taylor doesn't play well, it would be nice if Hugh Jackson would start Baker Mayfield on Thursday night against the Jets and Sam Darnold. Now, he won't do it, but it sure would be nice. For football fans.
Taylor will be the Browns starting quarterback moving forward. Yep. I don't think we see Baker Mayfield. I don't even think we hear his name until they're 1-11 in December.
I know. Yeah, unfortunately, and who knows if Hugh Jackson will be around though to make that move. Okay, let's wrap up with Oakland at Denver, and the Broncos are about a 5-6 point favorite at home, and we talked about this last week about Denver and Case Keenum. And Case Keenum was the sure bet guy. Case Keenum was a guy that was there, and he's not supposed to make mistakes. And with the defense they had, that was going to be a winning formula. And you know what? If Case Keenum doesn't make mistakes, Denver blows out Seattle as planned. And Denver was one of my top picks last week. Now, I didn't lose, but I didn't win, and that's never a good thing either. But Case Keenum was the reason why this game was actually close. He did not play particularly well, but they survived. Oakland, meanwhile, plays pretty well. But, again, their quarterback also was the reason that things didn't go well. Derek Carr made those awful interceptions, especially the end zone interception, which was the disaster. So he's got to grow up from that. He's done that before. You got to avoid the big turnover in spots like that. But, look, rivalry game, we'll see what that means. I don't know. This one's kind of tricky for me, but I think actually that this is going to be a pretty good football game. I don't and getting 6 points in a game that I actually think the Raiders have a shot at may not be a bad idea.
Yeah, and then look, you're getting 6 points in a game that was lined at 3 prior to last week. One thing I do every week here in Las Vegas, the Westgate Superbook posts lines for the following week's games.
Okay.
Each week, so I write them down every Wednesday.
Okay.
And that way you can see how much did the games
impact
from the last weekend actually matter. These are bettable numbers.
Yep.
And this line was 3, and now we're looking at 6. I think the move is warranted. On the one, let's put it this way: I'm reluctant to get involved with Oakland right now. Gruden, anytime you get a new head coach, you're going to have roster turnover.
Sure.
The Raiders' roster turnover was extraordinary this offseason. 31 new players on the 53-man roster. Mm-hmm. That's a lot for any coach at any time. It says Raiders in the uniform, and there's a handful of guys that you recognize, but it's also a team that doesn't, as we saw, they don't have any playmakers on defense. Not a one. Where's the edge rush coming from? Where's the pass rush coming from? It's not. Goff had all day to throw. And again, it was one of those stories where, all right, they played a bad first half, L.A., and they woke up in the second half and killed them. It's going to be a long 10 years that Oakland's paying John Gruden that $10 million a year. I'll tell you that much.
All right. Well,
I am not bullish on the Raiders. I want no part of Oakland this week, next week, the week after. I think there'll be a lot more money to be made betting against the Raiders than betting on them.
Yeah, I need to feel a lot better about Denver as a playoff team. With Keenum, must be better this week. He's got to be better. I was very disappointed how he played last week. I was very surprised. But first game, new team. Seattle is still Seattle in a way. Pete Carroll knows what he's doing, so I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for a week. But don't turn over the ball this week.
Actually, Keenum came out and said, "Hey, if I don't play as badly as I do, we'd have won that game by margin."
Yes.
And he said we, and then he said I need to play much better. I'll do that this week. So he owned up to it, and he talked the talk. But again, it's a career backup playing behind a dicey offensive line. We'll see what he can do.
Teddy, I mentioned last week, and I'll mention it again, that you have been featured on a lot of big networks, including CBS, CNBC, and when you were featured in the ESPN 30 for 30, what was that about?
Live betting. It was when live betting was brand new. The in-game betting. They did a feature. Chad Millman came out, and we did some stuff over at distant taping over at the Canner Books, and then now CG Technology over at the M, and it was just how do you live bet and who's doing it and what's it all about. So that's what the 30 for 30 was on.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of other shows in the area. So do you have one that you really it stands out as far as anything that you enjoyed?
Well, the movie. I was in a fun movie. It's called Life on the Line. It's one of the few. I don't know. There are a whole lot of documentaries that actually that accurately represent sports betting. But
okay.
Life on the Line is one of them, and of course you can find that on all the. I can't even think of the site, but you know what I'm talking about. Where
Amazon,
where you find old movies
like
and find old videos.
Who was in
Life
it? Anybody?
on the Line. Me, directed by Isaac Feeder.
Are you with a star?
Me, Steve Fezzik, John Netto. They're all,
That's cool.
But yeah, a handful of pros here in Vegas.
That's great. That's a nice experience, I'm sure. Teddy, I appreciate it. Enjoy the games this week. And how long before we start to feel a little bit comfortable about our teams as far as betting angles and things of that nature? Does it take more than a month?
I don't understand the question.
Like you start feeling a little bit more about, okay, I got to feel for this team. I got to feel because first week or two.
I feel pretty good about a bunch of teams right now.
Okay,
not all of them, and
sure.
I don't expect to have. I don't try to have a great read on every. Obviously you try to, but there's some teams you just don't get a rhythm with. But
yeah,
2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, there are definitely teams that I expect to have a good read on right off the bat. Teams that we can make money with in September and moving forward.
All right. Well, we will definitely track that. I appreciate it, Teddy. Enjoy this week. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, thanks. Best of luck.
You
Enjoy
too.
the game.
Thanks, Teddy. All right. That's Teddy Sevransky. And you can check out Teddy. Follow him on Twitter at his handicapping label. I think label's a good term. That's Teddy_covers. All right, again, at Teddy_covers. Teddy Sevransky is with us every Thursday, 3 college, 3 pro. Mark is with us on Wednesdays, 3 college, 3 pros. Dave Koken will be with me tomorrow, 3 college, 3 pro. That gives us 9 college, 9 pro every week. And, of course, we also have our college football show with Mitch Light from Athlon. That's coming up in a little less than an hour, give or take. The regular time is running a little bit late this week, but we'll get on with Mitch, and we'll talk some college football in general, not just picks, but we'll go over everything going on this week in college football, and that'll be coming up in a little bit, and then that'll wrap it up for the day. So it's a very busy day every Thursday with our 3 shows, and we're half the way through, or 2/3 of the way through. I guess I got to get my math right. All right, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. That's the best way of letting, this way we let you know exactly when the shows are available on demand. And that'll wrap it up here. Oh, by the way, as I've said at the open, if you have any questions or comments, you can send it to our email address, ofn@primesportsnetwork.com, or you can just send a message on our tweet. And again, that's at PrimeSN. For Ted Sevransky, I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Today on the Ourlads Football Radio Network. You know the drill. Alpha Mike Foxtrot.